It seems like the American public's patience for Donald Trump fixing America after 4 years of terrible leadership by Biden, it seems to be running thin. Basically, Donald Trump is starting to be blamed for whatever happened in the past several years. And when it comes to the economy, people are claiming that we're in a recession, that these economic figures are devastating the middle class. And now Donald Trump is having to fight people in the cabinet meetings over whether or not he's lying. First and foremost, let's just tackle what Donald Trump said a few months ago. So, January 29th, about a week into office, he says, "This is the Trump stock market because my polls against Biden are so good that investors are projecting that I will win and that will drive the market up and everything else is terrible. Watch the Middle East. And record setting inflation has already taken its toll. Make America great again." So, again, this was a year prior to getting into office. And he is ostensibly saying that the economy, like I said, a year before he even takes control, is to his credit. But nowadays, it's the exact opposite. Now, let's view what he says nowadays. Here he says, "This is Biden's stock market, not Trump's. I didn't take over until January 20th. Tariffs will soon start kicking in, and companies are starting to move into the U.S. in record numbers. Our country will boom, but we have to get rid of this Biden overhanging quote. This will take a while, has nothing to do with tariffs, only that he had left us with bad numbers. But when the boom begins, it will be like no other. Be patient." Triple exclamation points. This was posted earlier today in the morning. Now, this is super important. He, a year ago, again, was taking credit for something that he had nothing to do with. And then the stock market is not doing as well than it was a year ago. And now he's saying that it's Biden's fault. Now, any layperson can understand why that looks super stupid, that he's lying. And I have defenses for it. I love the guy, but this is certainly a bad look. Before I nag for too long, let's see what Donald Trump does when somebody confronts him. Again, this is a liberal reporter, from what I can tell, confronts him on this hypocrisy, so to speak.
Yeah, in the transition, sir, you frequently took credit for the stock market highs. You said it was a reflection of how well you were doing in the polls, and then after you were elected, you said the stock market highs were a reflection of how well the transition is going and the American people's confidence in your incoming administration. Now, the stock market's not doing so well, and you're saying that's the Biden stock market, yet you are the president. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay, now comment down below how you would answer this question, because for me, I could not answer that without lying. And I get that politicians have to do it. It's just the way the swamp works. However, Donald Trump is trying to be something that is different than that exact swamp. And yet he's finding himself faced with this sort of question. So let me know in the comments what you think.
I'm not taking credit or discredit for the stock market. I'm just saying that we inherited a mess, both at the borders. You could look at every.
Okay, so like again, I don't like to fact check, but he did literally say this is the Trump economy a year prior to him taking office, and then nowadays he's saying that it's Biden's fault. So when he says I'm not trying to credit or discredit, he just matter-of-factly is lying, or his memory's that bad. So I mean, and again, I like Donald Trump, but this is not a good look.
Single one of the people here, and no matter who it is, they're doing better, and they are far superior to what took place for 4 years before us. When you look at.
Now, here's the problem. Yes, it's pretty obvious, and it's low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, to be attacking Biden and to say that it was worse 4 years ago, because it certainly was. Whenever you want to mention anything, really, whether it be immigration, prices of things, inflation, things were much worse under Biden generally. However, this sort of act wears thin, okay? For example, Obama, 2009, 2010, he had a lot of political clout because a lot of people didn't blame Democrats, specifically a young guy like Obama, for the recession under Bush. However, by 2011, 2012, his approval ratings were getting very negative, and people started to say, okay, like, we get it, it's not your fault, but like you said you were going to clean it. And so Trump, again, it's only been 3.5 months, 100 days to be more precise, but still people are very impatient. People are having the minds and memories of goldfish, and I have that same problem. And so people are just saying like, okay, what the hell is the problem? And if there's a problem, why isn't it solved yet? And his answer is really lacking.
Prisoners being allowed to come into our country at will, just at will.
Okay, so what do prisoners have to do with the stock market?
Just at will. People from mental institutions, gang members, drug dealers. When you look at that, what they've done to our country, and also having to do with finance. Look at what happened with inflation.
Okay, so think about this. Trump has this problem, and it's gotten worse as he's gotten older, is that he kind of rambles. And it's like And again, caveat, I know this is a Trump supporting channel. I love Donald Trump still, but it's just becoming more and more of an issue. I don't know if it's like an age thing, but he likes to repeat a lot of the same talking points, which I understand because when you're doing the same job, you're going to talk about the same things. However, the way he does it, it seems like he's hitting on crutches. He's using them. When it comes to, hey, poignant question. Okay, answer this about the stock market. And now he's 2 sentences in talking about how the criminals led in by Biden, like what the hell does this have to do with anything? And then he catches himself and then starts talking about finance, though this pivot is very lacking. Now let's see it.
Look at what happened with inflation. We had the worst inflation probably in the history of our country. They say 48 years, but
Okay, so the problem with that critique, and again, I'm trying to look at this from the point of view of like some suburban swing voter. I'm somebody who's already a homer for Trump, right? So I already get the talking points. However, some 110 midwit, IQ midwit, they'd say, okay, well, Donald Trump, yeah, the inflation was worse under Biden, but how come the stock market was higher before you became president, Donald Trump? Because if the inflation was worse, which it undoubtedly was, how the hell was the stock market not worse then? Clearly, the elephant in the room, and I've talked to a lot of people. I'm a college Republican president. I talk to a lot of young people. The big disgruntlement with the presidency thus far is tariffs. And the tariffs most certainly have impacted the stock market by all means. And you could say that it's a temporary problem, that things will get better, and they probably will. And I believe in the tariffs. However, the short-term pain has to be acknowledged. You just can't pretend like it's not going to happen.
I would say in the history of our country, it ate away at people. And even though you saw a stock market going up somewhat, because in my case, I had the biggest stock market increase, 88% in the last term, in my last term.
What does it have to do with anything? You didn't have inflation in the first term. So then what's the argument?
But I don't view the stock market as the end all. It's an indicator.
Again, any president with a bad stock market will say it's one of many indicators, and vice versa. Trump would never shut up about the stock market in 2019 for obvious reasons. And so, again, more commonplace political jargon. And people like me voted for Trump, whether it be twice or 3 times, whatever, because he was not like the other ones. But he's, again, finding himself in this trench. And my frustration is not that he's lying, because generally I approve of, or rather not even that, but I understand sometimes you have to lie, in politics especially. However, I think the problem is that he didn't have to do this. Had he just said, okay, look, yes, things are worse off like right now. Yeah, of course, the economy shrunk by 0.3% this quarter, and it went up by over 2% in the last Biden quarter. Now, I believe it's mostly a temporary thing. By 6 months from now or a year from now, things will be better. I believe that. But a lot of people don't. And to pretend like things aren't getting worse in the short term is just stupid, because then people will say, okay, you're promising the tariffs will make things better in a year, but things are worse now and you won't even acknowledge that they're worse. So then how the hell does that even make sense?
Indicator. But what the stock market really tells you, and when you look at the stock market in this case, is it says how bad a situation we inherit.
Okay, so how bad a situation we inherited. Now, the problem with this, Mr. President, right, is that the stock market was better off in January of this year when you took office right after Biden than it is now after you've had over 3 months to fix whatever problems you just enumerated, is what I would say if I'm the reporter antagonizing the president. Because honestly, that's as simple as it needs to be. It's not more complicated than that. It's worse off now than when you started to fix the problem. So either you're doing something that'll pay off long term, but just admit that it's getting worse now, or everybody's just like stupid and you're right, which just doesn't make sense. Now, for the people in the chat that are saying, hey, you're being too hard on Trump, let's just look at what other Trump-aligned people would say. So Dave Portnoy, a big guy in sports media, says, what's the old expression? Don't piss down my back and tell me that it's raining. Well, that applies here. The stock market is a direct reflection of the Trump's first 100 days in office. Doesn't mean that it won't get better and that we don't need to be patient, but the market is not Biden's, which is just simply true. So it'd be one thing if he tells people what I just said, and it's another for him to go to his own supporters implicitly in the news and say, no, it's not getting worse. Like, of course it is, and it's fine. You know, with acne, a lot of acne medication, when you take it, actually makes you break out and you get more zits on your face for a couple weeks, and then you look a lot better a month later. However, to pretend like you're not like breaking out is just a lie to yourself and to everyone else. Now, as we wrap up the video, let's just cover some little tidbits in the news. So Rand Paul apparently was working with Democrats to end Trump's powers for the tariff war against China specifically. Now, Rand Paul, libertarian, principled fool in this case, clearly took an L, which I'm very glad. that he did. But my point with bringing this up is that there are people in Congress, in the deep state, so to speak, that are going to try to stymie the Trump agenda. So not only does Trump have to defeat the people in Congress to some degree, have a Congress in and of itself that's marginally Republican, however, not enough to get any significant legislation passed, minus some like anti-trans stuff and the Lake and Riley stuff, but like big legislation that should be passing is not passing. And so Trump is having to deal and fight with a lot of different groups and sectors. So that's why I have a lot of empathy for him, because he does not have an easy road ahead of him. But what I don't want him to do is to lie to his deepest supporters, like people like me, because I'm too smart for that. I can see through it. Comment down below if you can, because in all honesty, it's not too hard to say. You know, Franklin Roosevelt had a horrible time as president at the beginning, and then it paid off. Why? Because I think there was a modicum of understanding in the country where if we're in a communal suffering, that if it's for a better purpose, we can all strive together and get through it. However, to not be completely honest, to not just take an L temporarily, is seemingly a problem and a lack of humility from certain people in power, and we need to fix that. All right, final thing. Q1 GDP data. So again, there's going to be negative news coming up recently or coming up soon that the economy is shrinking, therefore we're in a recession, which I guess technically might be the case. However, you need 2 consecutive quarters of shrinkage for it to count as one. Now, if you look at the growth of America, we went down by 0.3%. Not good. We should be going up by like 3. Okay, but if you look at Europe, they're up by only 0.4, Italy by 0.3, Germany by 0.2, Austria by 0.2, France by 0.1, Mexico by 0.2. So the rest of the world is not that bad, is not doing so hot either. And so that's a little bit of solace we can take, that we're not really losing this. And plus, if we're the ones starting the tariff war, so to speak, for us to be only losing a little bit and them to not swell in the support and doing trade amongst each other means that the whole strategy by Donald Trump, as incoherent as it might seem, is actually working. So if you like this video, like the video, comment if you have any suggestions. Subscribe if you want more content like this, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Adios.